Alright, so we're gonna create our first character, and it's gonna be a basic, simple swordsman. So as you can see, I've already prepared some assets. I'm not gonna go into details about how to import your assets in Unity. In the PDF documentation, which you must read, there's a link to the official Unity documentation, and there's plenty of information about importing your assets there. Just two quick reminders. Your character rig should be set to humanoid, unless it's a monster. In that case, you can leave it to generic. The game uses the HDRP Unity render pipeline, and it can be a little bit unusual in terms of textures. All the metalness, smoothness, ambient occlusion informations are all packed into one textures, which they call the HDRP mask. And again, there's plenty of information about that subject in the official Unity documentation. Alright, so let's drag our character prefab into the scene, unpack the prefab, then let's select an animator controller for our character. It's a one-handed swordsman we are creating, so let's select the one-handed animator controller 1H. Then you can preview the animations in the scene with the animation window. And let's get a sword for our character. So let's drag the prefab in the scene. And we're going to attach the sword to the right hand bone of the character. So I'm searching for the right hand. This is the bone we want. Unpack the sword prefab and drag the sword object as a child of the right hand bone. Let's set the sword position at 0, and then I'm gonna adjust properly the sword position. A good way to do that is to use the animation window and preview forward attack animation. As you can see, we have a attack hit event, which is a perfect moment in the animation to properly align the sword. Alright, that seems okay. Now let's move on. Let's name our character CR One Hand Sword. You can name it whatever you want, but to keep a consistent naming scheme will help you once you got multiple characters. Now create a folder of the same name in the character folder. And let's create a new prefab by dragging this object into the folder. Alright, so now we can remove our prefab from the scene. And the next step is combining meshes. Now, in order for the character to be rendered in the game, all of its parts, the body, the armor, the weapon, all of it needs to be combined in one mesh and one material. So for that we have our mesh combiner tool. So let's drag our character prefab. If you have emissive textures on your character, make sure to check this box. Select the root bone and click combine. So now you can see it has generated a bunch of files and a new prefab named combined. That's our character combined into one mesh and one material. Now, if you had some specific settings on your original materials like alpha clipping or double-sided, you may need to reset them on this combined material. Alright, let's remove our character from the scene and move on to the next step. So in EFBS, all characters need to have what we call LODs, or level of details. So in case you don't know, LODs are basically multiple versions of the same mesh with different polygon resolutions. So when the camera in game gets far away from a character, it's not going to display the full resolution mesh, but a reduced version with far less polygons in it. And rather than create these versions yourself, there is a tool called Simplygon which is going to do that for us. So to work Simplygon, we'll need two folders, an input folder and an output folder. So let's create these. You can create them any way you want. Next, we will need to export our combined character mesh. So make sure to select the right prefab, the one called combined, and export it in the input folder we just created. Alright, so we have our exported file right here. And now we're going to launch the Simplygon tool. So it needs a file to process. This is the file we just exported. And an output folder. Next, we need to choose between two settings, humanoid or monsters. In our case, it's going to be humanoid. And click Generate LODs. Alright, let's check out our output folder. And there we go, we have 7 generated LODs. So back into Unity, let's create a LODs folder in our character folder. And then import our generated LODs. Alright, let's drag our LOD1 into the scene and apply the combine material to it. Then unpack the prefab, and we need to add an animator component. For the controller, we'll select one H for one-handed. And then it needs an avatar, and we're gonna copy it from the combined prefab. Then let's drag back our object into the LODs folder and create a new prefab. Let's remove it from the scene. Alright, so next up we're going to use the Animation Baker tool. Next we'll drag our 7 LOD prefabs in there. Just make sure that you select the right LOD1 prefab, the one with the material applied and the animator. Click Bake Animations. And as you can see, it generated a new file containing the characters' animations baked into textures and the different LODs. Okay, next we're going to create a thumbnail for our character, so let's launch the thumbnail tool. Drag our base prefab and play with the settings until we are satisfied. And there we have our generated thumbnail. Okay, the next step and the last one is to fill out some information about our character in the character editor window. So this is a name that will be displayed in-game. Let's drag our base prefab and our baked animation file. Then for the material, we're gonna duplicate the combine material by pressing Ctrl D and add skinned to its name. So in this material, we're gonna change the shader and select EFBS lit skinned. Next, we need to check Enable GPU instancing. Let's drag this material, the thumbnail, select the right animation set, the right sound set. Then we need to specify the height of the character. So let's play with the helper tool, and once we got the right height, click Copy Value to Editor window. The bounding radius for most humanoid characters, you can leave it to 1. In case your character is too big and the sphere doesn't cover it entirely, you can increase the value. Collision and hitbox radius are same principle here. Particle height, it's the height at which blood particles, for example, are gonna be spawned in the game. For most human characters, you can leave it to 1.2. Health is pretty self-explanatory. Attack and weapon range, so the helper tool is a little bit more complicated here. First, select the right animation set. And then the tool needs to know where the tip of the weapon is exactly. So under the sword here, we're going to create a new object, position it right at the tip of the weapon, and drop it into the field. Click Compute Range and then Copy Value. Damage points, attack cooldown, melee skill is how much the character is great at parrying, range skill is for archers, and for our one-handed swordsman, that's it, we can save. So now we have a new JSON file that contains all the value we just entered.